I'm self-taught, and I spent many years working in the construction industry, and I really didn't know what I was going to do. I knew that wasn't it. I knew that wasn't going to be the full story of my life, but it paid the bills and it kind of suited my lifestyle at the time. And probably around my 21st birthday, my brother gifted me with a set of paints. Liquitex acrylic paints, and they were just a little starter set, and it came with a thick little pad of tear-off canvas sheets and some brushes. And that started the ball rolling for me. I went through the whole stack of canvases, making silly little paintings, pushing paint around, and had the best time of my life, and I just never stopped. I kept going out to buy more paint and more canvas, and so it became a part-time hobby. Whenever I wasn't working, I was home making some kind of painting or playing with paint in some fashion. My process is slightly involved, and it kind of jumps back and forth. Sometimes I'll have a clear idea of what direction I want to go in and what I want to do with something. More often than not, I work from a specific size first. I'm attracted to a size of a panel, dimensions, and it kind of grows from there. I'll play with it and muddle my way through it, and it'll grow from that. But I've gotten to the point now where I have several working series, different backgrounds for target imagery, different types of target imagery. So I'm beginning to kind of develop more of an ability to say, okay, I want to do a porno-based piece with a Japanese figurine, and I'm going to go in that direction. That's about as specific as I've gotten so far at working a piece. And then the color and how I treat it and the kind of deconstruction I do to the paper, that's all kind of something I really don't have a lot of control over, because once I get in there and start playing with it, I just can't help myself, and it's all about fixing it and making it look right. And a lot of the times, my final product is a result of me having screwed up several times during the process, and in going in and trying to fix that, I end up with the final result. So I do a lot of that back and forth where it's like, oh, I can't believe I just did that. I need to go in and fix that and repair that and make that work. And then I end up at the end, after much hand-wringing and sanding and fiddling about, it ends up being what it is. It's a similar process for each piece regardless of the backdrop. I'll actually take pistol targets to the range and shoot them. And I have a 9mm and a 40 caliber. I use the 40 caliber a lot because that makes a bigger hole, which reads nicely on the finished piece. And I just like the way the paper gets torn around the hole from the impact and whatnot. So I'll shoot the targets at the range, and I used to go a lot when I first started because it was just exciting, and then it kind of became a chore. So I go when I need to go, and that's usually maybe once a month, and I'll take a lot of targets with me, and I'll shoot for a couple hours and get a lot of targets made. And then I'll bring them back to the studio, and I'll take an image that I've got a silhouette that's been printed to a transparency, and that's actually made from a live model who will pose here in the studio, and I'll take those photographs and turn them into this transparency that I can then project onto a target. So I've got a black image projected onto a target, and I can manipulate where the holes are going to be. I can adjust everything so I like where the lines are. So I get all the composition where I want it, and then I just go and cut the target out after I've traced it out with the transparency. I'll cut the image out of the target, and then that gets glued onto whatever surface has already been prepared. So the standard process usually involves the making of the backdrop first, the panel, the backdrop. Once the backdrop is done, I'll then lay the target into the backdrop. And it all gets glued. It's all paper, all different types of newsprint, pornography, all paper material that is glued onto the panel. Once that's done, I'll usually go back in and fiddle around with paint or oil stick and add a little of this, take a little of that away. And when I'm happy with that, it gets sealed, and if it's going to get a resin finish, it then gets poured with resin. I'm doing both. I do matte finishes where there's no resin finish on it at all. It's kind of a flat, and then I'll do the high gloss resin. And I also do a sanded resin now too. I'm also doing pieces where I'll pour the resin and then go back after it's dry and sand it to a bit of a frosted finish. So there's basically 3 finished products. Influences on the art, I get it from everywhere. I'm very, very visual, and I mean museums, Newsprint, I love looking through magazines. I love looking through the newspaper every day. I love going to art openings. I love going to museum openings. So I pull it from all directions, billboards, you name it. If you can see something and be impressed by it, I'll take little elements of stuff I see every day, and somehow it ends up in the work. Established artists and historical artists, I'd have to say, you know, I love Modigliani. I love Picasso, of course. Soutine, Klimt. I love Klimt. Pollock, you know, all of the big heavy hitters. Rothko, love Rothko. Franz Klein. Contemporary artists, my favorite contemporary artist right now would be Andy Goldsworthy. And then there's a guy locally here named Tim Hawkinson, who I love. And then there's an artist out of the East Coast. I think she lives in Pennsylvania now, Lee Bonnecue. So those are my top three. And then there's William Kentridge, who's in Africa. Those are probably my top four contemporary living artists that are just amazing. And then, yeah, I just pull, and my fellow artists, my contemporaries here on the West Side, we all influence each other in one way or another because we're always seeing each other's stuff and commenting on it and, you know, giving each other tips we don't want. And I've thought about defining art on more than one occasion, and I have a tough time with it. For me, it's really kind of a compulsion. I still don't fully understand it for myself. It's just something that I know. I love going to that place, and the making of art in any part of the process, 5 hours can go by in 5 minutes for me, and I love that. And it's been, you know, a driving force for me in the making of art since I started. There's just something very satisfying about being in that place. As far as giving it a concrete definition, it's tough, you know. I'm not really sure. People have been doing it since the caves and Chevalier, you know, since people were able to make something visual, they've been compelled to do it. And I'm not really sure what that's all about, but I know that it's inherent in human nature. And I think, you know, I think anybody can be an artist. You know, I have friends and contemporaries that will say, well, you have to have the talent. If you don't have the talent, there's no art. But I mean, you know, look at any 3-year-old, you know, they make great paintings. So I think, you know, I think anybody can be an artist. I think it's a matter, it comes down to giving yourself permission to follow that place, to follow that line of thinking, to follow that line of behavior. And yeah, I can't really put a concrete definition on what it's about beyond that. It's just kind of something I do, you know. So, but I feel it's a necessary part of society. I feel it's definitely, you know, it's got great historical value and it's got great socio-political value. And I mean, you know, what would the world be like without art? It's like asking what would the world be like without music. You know, they're things that humans feed off of in a really positive way. So I guess that's the closest I can come to a definition. As far as when I'm creating pieces and what I'm looking to say, it's relatively new for me that I've found a politically driven voice, the ability to make any kind of comment other than look at how nice that is. So I go back and forth, you know. Sometimes I'll be making a piece and I'll think to myself, this is going to go over well. I like it, people are going to like it. But most of the time I'm just satisfying my own need for aesthetic, you know, gratification. It's like, that looks right, it feels right. And then for me now with the targets, the use of different backdrops gives me the ability to add a message into it for myself. The newsprint work, where there's New York Times and LA Times as a backdrop, I mean, they're great. They're like a little time capsule, you know. Whatever is on that front page that's used to make that piece says something about what's going on in society at any given moment, you know. So right there, I get to make a little bit of a statement. And then, you know, depending on what type of target I put in, a girl with a gun, a samurai wielding a blade, you know, a flower, poppies, you know, you can get crazy with what type of imagery you want to drop in over that imagery. So that's nice. That gives me the ability to kind of, you know, make subtle comments, and or I can get, you know, when I start adding verbiage to the pieces, then I can get more direct. So yeah, that's kind of how that works for me so far. The bulletproof piece is a pornographic backdrop, sanded back, kind of made a little more subtle and had some color pushed into it. For me, A lot of these pornography pieces, especially when they have a female target image on it, speaks to a woman struggling against what society and the print media in general has pushed upon her as far as what she needs to do and look like to be socially acceptable and to be desirable. And that's why we have all this plastic surgery happening, and people are never happy with themselves. It all needs to be augmented and enhanced and improved. And kids are now walking around with shirts that say porn star on them. And I graduated high school in '82, and for me, my experience with pornography was like, yeah, all the guys looked at pornography. They all stole it from their dads or bought it at the store, or found it in the woods and looked at it. And but it wasn't talked about between the sexes. It wasn't something that girls talked about. And it wasn't something that was celebrated socially. Porn stars weren't hip. And that's kind of how that plays into that whole thing. It's kind of my statement of like, it's ridiculous. It's sad to see teenage girls celebrating it. And most of the work with pornography speaks to that. My perspective as a male, really. I mean, I can't begin to appreciate what women actually feel like other than what I see, what I observe, and what they go through to fit that model, that's been built for them. That's more of a decorative piece that's got less of a statement to it. It's comprised of pistol targets that have been soaked in various colors of basically watercolor and dried out and then cut into ribbons. And then the target ribbons are then glued onto the panel in that vertical stripe configuration, and then there's a small target laying in over that. And for me, that's kind of just one of the aesthetic ones. It's like I just love the color of it, and I love the composition of it. So I wasn't really trying to say too much with that, but still, you got a target, you got a guy there with holes in him and his hand on his hip, and he's got some kind of attitude to him. So people do read stuff into that too. My mom, first time she saw one of those guys with his hand on his hip and the holes in him, she said, it's like we all take hits in life. He's taking his hits. There you go. He's got holes in him. So I like that take on it too. That worked for me, but for me it's really just like I like the way that looks. There's a newsprint piece called Shop and Destroy, and that features a shopping girl target. She's very happy. She's got her leg up in the air and one hand behind her head and her bag's flung loosely behind her, and everybody's happy, and she's laid in over a New York Times front page and an LA Times front page. The LA Times features the front page from when Griffith Park happened, and there was the big, I think it was May Day, but there was a big Latino demonstration about immigration, and they all got beat up by the cops in Griffith Park. And then above that is a wonderful New York Times picture of an Iraqi soldier and an American soldier in the streets of Baghdad somewhere, clearly taking cover from getting shot at. And so it speaks on both levels of socio-political mayhem that's been happening in our country for the last 8 years plus. And meanwhile, you get this happy shopper hanging out, And she's also got a gold leaf halo, which I really like. And the halo figures prominently in a lot of my work. And for me, that generally represents your soul. Everybody carries a soul. Everybody carries some kind of energy inside them. So for me, it kind of represents that. Plus, I was raised Roman Catholic, so I'm just steeped in that iconography. It's like the halo. It's everywhere. Flowers always kind of represent femininity. They always kind of represent the female side. Whether they're behind the guy or a girl image, they're kind of just the softer side of life, the love in life, the nice things in life that exist out there. So I always like to use a little flower grid somewhere to, kind of counterbalance whatever violent imagery there might be on there.